Uh, so, I got my Koike Handy Auto torch out cutting some shit, and this is a mechanized torch, I guess would be the right word for it. But it comes with a bitchin' little manual, shows you actually like good information and what have you. That right there, like, you know, cutting a bevel, it'll do all kinds of cool shit. This one is older. I don't know how old exactly. But what's really cool is that it uses Victor tips. So you can see this says Koike, made in Japan. But if we pop this open here and look at one of the tips, it is a Victor tip. And actually, you know what? I just noticed the Victor tips, they're completely copper. This is brass on top, copper on the bottom. But that's really cool. I think the modern ones use Koike tips. I'm sure they have their own. I don't have one of the modern torches. I have this one. And I am quite happy that it uses standardized Victor tips. But so it is a, I guess what I would call, like, best describe this as, is that it's a mechanized handheld torch. And so it is, you know, a handheld torch. You could cut with it just by hand if you wanted to. But the whole advantage to this thing, see if I can do this one-handed while holding the phone here. It's got a little motor on the inside of it, little drive shaft, turns this traction wheel, and you would set it on a piece of plate, turn the speed up here, and it just moves itself along, cutting. And really all you have to do is just barely support it on the rear, you know, and make sure it doesn't go sideways on you or whatever, but just kind of like guide it along. And it's not a track torch, and it does not replace a track torch, but it does have this magnetic track that you can put it into. Got a little groove cut in it, like so. And so if you wanted to, you would put the idler wheel in that groove, and then it'll run down the track as such. But the nice thing about this is that while you're using it, you can just as easily, you know, turn it around like so and make radius cuts with it. You can do angle cuts with it, circle cuts, all kinds of different shit. But this thing never ceases to amaze me how well this thing does. And I'm not particularly good or experienced with this torch, but here is a piece of one-inch plate, and using oxypropane on it, and like it just cracks me up how freaking well this thing does. And for being relatively so simple. And you know, like I was saying, it's not a track torch. It doesn't replace a track torch. But to me, one of the big advantages to this is that, is this still warm? Yeah, it is. One of the big advantages to this is that this track that it rides in, you know, has just got two magnets on the backside. And, you know, like I was saying, you can use the track if you want to, you know, or even like that right there if you wanted to cut across that line, you could just as easily oh, I'm not doing a good job of it. Okay, switch. You could just as easily follow that line with it, just freehand. And so if you had a weird, shape to cut out or something like that, this plate here, I'm actually going to be cutting some hooks out of for the pallet forks on my backhoe. And there's not, I don't know how you want to call that. It's, I don't know if you would call it, it's not a regular shape. There will be some straight lines and there will be some curves on it, but the curves are not necessarily a continuous part of a circle. Like the curve changes halfway, or at least that's how I think I'm going to do it. So you couldn't necessarily, not saying it's impossible, but you couldn't necessarily do it with like a circle burner or whatever. But with this thing here, you just draw the shape out on the table and just follow it along and trace it out. But yeah, I've got a couple more videos about it on my channel if you're curious to check it out more. I actually power it off of a Milwaukee 18-volt battery, or you could use a 12-volt battery for that matter too. But it just uses the standard barrel plugs, or whatever these are called, that come on these little power adapters. And then like what I love about this versus a track torch is the portability. Not saying that people don't take track torches out in the field or whatever, but all you need to run this thing is the battery for the power source. It's got its own cable on it. You plug fuel and oxygen into the back of it, and away she goes. And it all fits in a pretty, I don't know, couple hand large, a pretty nice little carry tote here. You just take it with you wherever you go. And like I said, I'm not particularly good with this thing, not particularly experienced. I don't have very much time on it. And yet, what a beautiful cut it makes. I was going to say too, so these torches are made in Japan. Koike is a Japanese company, and yet thankfully the offset on this edge here is 2.5 inches from like the outside edge to the curve for the cut is 2.5 inch. So it's, I don't know if this is because this is an older one that was like specifically made for the US market with the Victor tips, or what the deal is, but that part is quite handy. It does have permanent magnets on the rail here, but I find it to be easy enough to, if you need to, bump the rail around with a hammer. I was originally going to like modify this rail to be able to take these switchable magnets. You just flip a switch and they're stuck on a piece of plate, or you release the lever and they come off. But I personally find the permanent magnets not to be too much of a pain to deal with, but just the precision of this thing just still amazes me. This was the strip that I had cut off the end of here, because you can see I had a nice big old gnarly fuck up in the center there. But yeah, you just measure out 2.5 inches, let her rip, and cuts off a nice little deal like so.